welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. Certainly pleased to have everybody here tonight. This is Tuesday, February 14th, and first we want to introduce you to your City Council.
Council members Kiley.
Here.
Neitzer.
Here.
Rolfing.
Here.
Selberg.
Here.
Starr.
Present.
Staley.
Here.
Erickson.
Here.
Erpenbach.
Here.
Councilors, thank you very much. Appreciate that. In the City of Sioux Falls, we started our City Council meetings with an invocation. And we're very, very pleased to have Pastor Eric Cannis back. He's with Empire Baptist Temple here in Sioux Falls. So, Pastor, thank you for coming back. What we'd ask you to do is to stand, please, for the pastor's invocation, and then remain standing for a pledge of allegiance. Pastor Eric.
Here. Then our speakers are out.
Let's pray. Our Father, we thank you tonight for the honor it is to live in a city that is as renowned as ours is. Lord, we think tonight of what's before us, the law enforcement officers that watch our backs at night so we can have the safety we have, or the council members that go through making decisions and sometimes hard decisions. Lord, we just ask that you'd give your guidance, your wisdom. And Lord, it's been many, many years in this nation that great men and leaders have called upon you for insight and understanding in sometimes some hard areas. So Lord, we ask for that tonight. We ask that you'd give us the leadership that you would have over this great city, that we may continue to be a safe and great and prosperous city. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. Certainly pleased to have all of you here today. I do have a proclamation I'd love to read. And is there anybody here from Congenital Heart? Welcome. Folks, if there are more, come forward. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Could I just ask you to introduce yourself to the people of our city, please? Thank you.
My name is Aubrey Burns. This is my husband, Rick, our oldest son, Wyatt, and our heart baby, Colton.
Welcome.
My name is Jane Clemmy. This is my husband, John, and my son, Josh. He's not a heart baby. He's a heart stud muffin.
Well, it's good to have you here tonight. Thank you. And on your behalf and many, many others, I would like to read this proclamation. Whereas the health and well-being of all children throughout our city are of paramount importance to the Sioux Empire families and communities. Whereas thousands of children are born with birth defects every year, including approximately 40,000 children in the United States who begin life with one of more than 35 identified forms of congenital heart defects. Whereas congenital heart defects are among our city's most common birth defects, and they are often fatal due to their seriousness, a lack of effective medical intervention options, and the limited availability of infant donor hearts. Whereas the origins and symptoms of congenital heart defects are becoming more readily identifiable, and the range of surgical options are expanding continuously, thanks to doctors and scientists' diligent research efforts and field experiences that extend our body of knowledge every single day. Whereas there's much to learn about the causes of and effective treatments of congenital heart defects, and it is important for parents, pediatricians, and nurses to recognize the warning signs associated with congenital heart defects among newborns so that they may provide proper treatment as early as possible. Whereas many of the Sioux Empire families and communities are directly or indirectly affected by infant illness and death caused by congenital heart defects. And I applaud the efforts of the doctors and the scientists everywhere who work diligently to solve life's medical mysteries and to improve the quality of life for us all. Now, therefore, I am Mike Huther, the mayor of the city of Sioux Falls, and do hereby proclaim February 7th through the 14th as Congenital Heart Defect Awareness Week in Sioux Falls. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for representing this worthy effort. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Councilors, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll now move to our consent agenda. Councilors, any motions, changes?
Second, Erpenbach.
Council Chair Rolfing has made a motion to approve our consent agenda tonight, seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. If there is no discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Council members Kiley,
Yes.
Neitzer,
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Staley.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Councilors, that is passed 8-0. Thank you. Our regular agenda, any changes to that?
Move to approve, Erickson.
Second, Selberg.
Councilor Erickson has made a motion to approve our regular agenda tonight, seconded by Councilor Selberg. If there's no discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Council members Kiley,
Yes.
Neitzer,
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Staley.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Thank you, Council. Folks, welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. This is a great opportunity for you to engage the Council on really any topic that's of importance to you. I know there's some items coming up later on, and we'd ask you, if you want to talk about those, to wait until those agenda items come up. But really any other topic, just come forward. Just a couple things. We'd ask you just to introduce yourself to the people of our city. The council would ask you to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. And then if it is a comment involving the councilors or the council, we'd ask you to address the council as a whole versus individually. So, folks, anybody want to engage the council? Welcome.
Scott Erisman, Sioux Falls. In 2011, a baby died at a city and state licensed daycare. The provider's license was immediately suspended while the Sioux Falls Police Department, the Health Department, investigated and monitored with the assistance of the state's attorney's office. With previous violations, it was determined that there were too many children in the care of the provider. After a 3-year investigation, it was determined that the death was accidental and the provider was charged with a misdemeanor of child neglect, filing a false report to police. She had to spend 10 days in jail and her license was revoked for life. So why bring this up? The similarities between this case and the Copper Lounge collapse are similar. Both cases, someone died. Both were licensed and permitted to do work in Sioux Falls. Both had previous violations with the city. But how do they differ? Well, there was a full-scale investigation, as there should be, of the provider by the city and the county authorities of the daycare provider. With the building collapse, only the insurance and OSHA, a federal agency, is investigating. Why? I don't know why. Either way, my point is, why on earth would we not investigate this just like we did with the daycare provider? When there's a house fire and someone dies, the police department, the fire department, they investigate. But what is even more troubling than this inaction by the city is that the city development office and the mayor would propose we use the same development company involved in this tragedy to build a taxpayer-funded parking ramp. Ludicrous. I encourage the council to not approve of this development agreement until the results of the OSHA investigation are final, or find another contractor, to be quite honest with you. And if something is found to be wrong, the city and the state's attorney need to file charges as necessary, as they did with the daycare provider. I've been talking to several different business owners downtown. This is another issue with the whole thing. One of them, who owns a restaurant downtown, told me he didn't have one single person walk through his door for 10 days. When you own a restaurant and there's no business for 10 days, that's quite a while. And I asked him, I said, what kind of contact have you had with the city or insurance companies or anything about being, subsidized for this? He says, I've had none. And he's not the only business owner I've talked to who's lost a lot of business. I have no idea. I have no idea why we wouldn't investigate this. It is something that everybody's talking about. There's still people asking the question. We understand the OSHA investigation, but no one from the city is investigating why. I don't know why. But hopefully the city council uses the power of all of your 8 votes to vote no on this development company doing any more business in this city. Thank you.
Folks, did anybody else want to engage the council? Well, welcome, sir.
Tommy Schmitz, just point of clarification, would I be allowed to speak regarding the contract imposition later in the
Yes,
presentation?
absolutely, Tommy.
Okay, I will wait till that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, again, there's a couple of items coming up later. If they are second readings or resolutions, for example, 7 and 8, we'd ask you to wait for your speak at that time. Thank you. Welcome.
Tim Stanga. People that were watching the city council meeting last week, talked to a few of them. They want to thank the city council for trying to get open and honest government, something that we really need in Sioux Falls. There was a lot of things said, a lot of things done last week that a lot of the people watching this really didn't like what went on. For one, you get a lot of people that state, why would you veto something if you didn't know that you had the votes to be able to win over the veto? A lot of people think about that. I'm almost thinking there might have been some phone calls maybe before the veto was put in place to see if he had the votes to be able to do it. You know, I've been called an activist. I've been put into the troubled 5. But when somebody talks about respect, it's called that you have to earn respect. Just because you're sitting up here doesn't mean that we have to respect what you guys think of what you expect us to do. But I think it goes both ways. Respect goes both ways. It was stated that somebody brought up belittled. God, I've been belittled so many times. Every time I come up here, it isn't even funny. But I guess if you really want to put it in that context, you want to put it as a guilty conscience. Because one reason, when there's a city councilor that's telling the truth on what they see and how they see it, and then you want to come and say that you're belittled, that's a guilty conscience. I guess what I want to say is what was done last week was just a travesty on how it was done. It was the citizens of Sioux Falls seeing the true colors of what's being done in Sioux Falls, and they're ready to drain the swamp.
Folks, did anybody else want to engage the council on that topic? Welcome, please.
Thank you, Mayor Huther, members of the council. My name is Jason Ball. I am the newly appointed president of the Sioux Falls Area Chamber of Commerce. I have no other business tonight other than to present myself to you for your examination. I am thrilled to become a new member of this community. Most recently, I came out of Hutchinson, Kansas, which is in the Wichita area and part of the Wichita, Kansas labor shed, and before that spent 5 years doing economic development in the city of Lincoln, Nebraska. When this opportunity to apply for the job with the board of the chamber came up, I hopped all over it as soon as I could. I knew this was the type of community, growing community, forward-thinking community that I would just love to have the opportunity to be a part of. I'm thrilled and honored to have this opportunity. So I look forward to working with each and every one of you in the coming months and years, and just so thankful for the warm reception I've received from everyone in the community. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Jason. Welcome to Sioux Falls. Folks, anybody else, welcome.
Greetings, elected representatives, and greetings, citizens. My name is David Sokaitis, as you can tell, and I've got two topics today, a little unusual for me, and they're both related to activities that happened 2 meetings ago. Oh, gee. Here we go. The first topic, I'm referring to a comment made by a counselor, and he said that we should either record all meetings or none. I'm kind of cheating on the highlighting there. I hope he doesn't mind too much, but I think it's a marvelous idea. We should record all meetings. It doesn't seem like it's really all that difficult. We've got the equipment. There's a nice space here. I'm sure there are other spaces, and I could recommend that you start with the board meetings that deal with the most money and work your way down the list. That way it's not all at once. You can phase it in and take care of things and increase visibility and transparency and all that manner of good stuff. Oh, wrong way. A couple weeks ago, City Ordinance 55 was passed, and I'd like to recommend that you review the ordinance and change it. You could start with the title. The ordinance is named Privately Owned Best Management Practices, and that's really not a very descriptive name. Best management practices can be applied to anything. From what I could tell, a much better title of this particular ordinance might be Private Stormwater Facility, because that's what they are. Lots of problems with this particular ordinance. There's some constitutionality questions, actually quite a large series of those. There's part of it says that there's a reasonable time limit for the correction not to exceed 90 days. Well, how long is this reasonable time limit? It's not specified. That is unconstitutionally vague. That violates due process. The penalty for this problem is amazing. From what I could tell, it has to do with like water treatment ponds, settling ponds. And the man who was here talking about it said that one problem might be having too many weeds in your pond. The penalty for this is $100 a day per ordinance 40999. For having weeds in your pond, $100 a day, and that's for the first violation. The third violation, it's $300 a day. I can't imagine that having weeds in your pond could justify $300 a day. I just don't see any point to that whatsoever. And having an extreme penalty is in violation of the Constitution, as you might expect. There's also problems with multiple jeopardy. The last line there comes right from the Constitution, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. Well, this ordinance allows you to be put in jeopardy multiple times. You only have a certain time to respond, and if you're beyond that, you get $100 every day. Well, the everyday bit is multiple jeopardy, and it happens to be unconstitutional. And then there's problems with violation of privacy. The ordinance says that the government shall have the right to enter the premises. No suspicion needed. That's against government against the Constitution. It says no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, and that's not what the ordinance says. If you've done a little bit of legal research, you'll notice that there are administrative warrants and criminal warrants, and they're supposed to be different. With an administrative warrant, it's supposed to be for building code violations. You don't need suspicion. Criminal warrants, you better have suspicion. But the problem we have in this country is that if they enter your place on an administrative warrant and find cause for a criminal warrant, they'll come back with a criminal warrant. So effectively, an administrative warrant is a euphemism for any kind of warrant they want after they're there. Now we have another problem. constitutionality, you only have 2 weeks to decide if you want to protest the injunction against you. A lot of people, they're kind of angry when they get some government notice. 2 weeks doesn't give them time to get over that. So they just mail in a check and call it good. But you're supposed to have a right to trial. If you're coerced into giving it up after 2 weeks, there goes your right to trial. And then there's a filing fee. The defendant, if they lose, gets to pay court costs. But the city doesn't pay the defendant's court costs if they lose.
David, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council? Welcome.
Hello, my name is Alexa Giebink. I'm here to read a letter written by my uncle, Robert Giebink, who could not be here today. My name is Robert W. Giebink. I am a physician here in town. I am writing you concerning the Glory House and the Minnehaha Ice and Rec property. My father, Robert R. Giebink, now deceased, was also a physician who practiced in Sioux Falls for many years. He was civic-minded and a philanthropist. He served in the state legislature so he could further the cause of establishing a 4-year medical school and increasing funding for the developmentally disabled. At one time, he owned 40 acres located north and east of the intersection of Interstate 229 and Western Avenue. He donated the land for the Glory House and Minnehaha Ice and Rec. He donated the land for what was then Sioux Vocational School for the Handicapped, now part of Lifescape. He served on the boards of all three. He led fundraising efforts. He donated the land for the Juvenile Detention Center. He jokingly said he did it so my 2 younger brothers and I would have a place to go. We were minors at the time. I work with people who have mental illness and addictions. Sadly, many of these people find their way into our jails and prisons. I have had several who received services through the Glory House. I know how difficult it is for this population to find housing and good jobs. I know how important it is for them to have a good support system. I can see no better use for the Minnehaha Ice and Rec property than to build housing for Glory House residents who are ready to take the next step and begin living independently. I know the cost of recidivism to the city, this county, and the state. It takes a human toll too. I believe donating the property and investing in the housing will result in savings to the taxpayer that will continue far into the future and far exceed any amount the city could receive from selling this property. I know what the statistics show, and I can see no better way of honoring the memory of my father, who would have spoken strongly in favor of this decision if he was alive today. He would agree when I say we must consider the lives of all people first. And in addition to my uncle's words, I would like to add a few of my own. My mom is a recovering alcoholic, and she has been sober for 7 years. 7 years ago, she spent 5 months in prison as a result of her alcoholism, and she was lucky when she was released. She had a home to go to, she had a supportive family, and she had an environment that allowed her to recover and regain her life. And I believe that building a more long-term facility at the Ice and Rec property will help other people get that opportunity to recover. Thank you.
Alexa, thank you as well. Folks, anybody else? Welcome.
Hi. My name is Joan Giebink. I'm Doc Giebink's daughter. My dad is the man who donated the land, aided and supported the fundraising, and served on the boards of many of the nonprofits on 51st Street. First, I want to talk about a couple of misconceptions that the public may have about this proposal of the city to gift the ice rink to Glory House. First, the city only paid $1 for the ice rink back in the 90s, late 90s. Originally, the city was also to pay Sioux Falls Youth Hockey and possibly others as well an additional $100,000 for 5 years of lost revenue from the rink in advertising, signage, and concessions that they would no longer receive once the city owned the rink. So, like I said, they essentially got it for $1. It actually turned out to be less than that, and that money is held in trust at the Sioux Falls Community Foundation, which distributes the income yearly to the organization's youth hockey to pay for ice time at the new Shields Ice. The second point I want to make is I don't believe the ice rink land has any extra value because it lies on the future 49th Street expansion. I've always been told there will be no on-off access on 49th Street on that stretch. That means any new owner would still have to use 51st Street to access the property, thus not actually raising the value of the land once 49th Street goes through. Now I'd like to tell you about my dad's relationship with the Glory House and the ice rink. His relationship with Roger Frederickson and the Glory House began when both of our families grew up together near Park Ridge in the 50s and 60s. We also attended Roger's church. Later, when Roger came to Dad about his land on 51st, Dad gladly donated the land for a much expanded Glory House. He also helped with fundraising and served on the board for years. He was a firm believer in second chances for everyone, and that's the mission of the Glory House, second chances. Now about the Merc, which is what I will always call it because my kids played hockey there, was owned by the nonprofit Minnehaha Ice and Rec Center. What a great group of guys they were, mostly gone now. They were so eager for indoor year-round ice, they even mortgaged their homes to help pay for the building. Remember, these are the guys that got $1 from the city for the property. I was told they met with my dad for breakfast sometime in the mid-70s, hoping to find a sympathetic ear and maybe get a piece of land at a reduced price. After eating and chatting, one member came out bluntly and asked him if he would donate land for the indoor ice rink for youth hockey and figure skating. He immediately said yes, since he also believes kids kept busy in sports get into less trouble. The more sports, less trouble. So the Merc got the land for free. So my dad donated land and money and time to the Glory House and the Merc and a number of other Sioux Falls civic and charitable organizations. He did this because he believed that he could improve our community and the lives of our citizens. That's why giving the ice rink to Glory House is something that my entire family supports, because it pays forward the wonderful gift my dad made 40 years ago and would benefit the city for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Reagan Meyer. I'm the granddaughter of Dr. Robert R. Giebink, as well as the daughter of the woman who just spoke and the cousin of the woman who spoke before her. The degree of a civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons. Dostoevsky said that after he spent a little time on the inside. We in America, however, know too well that the chains that men and women wear when incarcerated extend far past their release date. These tangible shackles soon transform into the more permanent irons of stigma, shame, and isolation. Their subsequent re-entry into society is made all the more difficult with the lack of social programs at their disposal. As the country with the highest percentage of incarcerated individuals, I believe it is our civic duty to assist them if and when they re-enter society. Their time spent behind bars does not make them any less of a citizen, nor does it strip them of their basic rights as a human being. Unfortunately, in Sioux Falls, we have certain laws that allow that stigma and shame to permeate into residential housing. I understand that it is the right of an individual seller or landlord to refuse housing to an individual with a criminal background. But as a result, we are now facing a critical dilemma. Many of the shelters in Sioux Falls are overcrowded with former convicts, and those who seek to make amends and provide for their families are found wanting. It's a sad day when a city is incapable of providing for its citizens' basic fundamental needs. Needs that, when met, can lead to a decrease in recidivism rates. At last estimation, South Dakota's recidivism rate hovers right around 45%. A few local government officials have said that the face value of the land housing the Minnehaha Ice and Rec Center, or MERC, is too great of an opportunity to pass up, when in reality the possible profit is fractional in comparison to the ongoing costs of recently completed city projects or the grandiose building plans of the near future. It is my opinion that a marginal one-time profit for a city should not supersede the long-term benefits of its citizens. Regardless of individual opinions, formerly incarcerated individuals are our fellow citizens. They are part of our community. They, like all of us, have something to contribute, and you all, the City Council and Mayor Huther, as public servants should want your citizens to live and work to their fullest potential. I think it's time all of us stop searching for the get money quick scheme and start investing in people, because the lifespan of human capital far exceeds that of monetary gain. The MERC is where I learned to skate, where my grandfather, Dr. Robert R. Giebink, watched me play hockey. I used to wave at him through the plexiglass. He'd smile and chuckle to himself. No one knew that it was his doing that allowed such a recreation center to be built. It was his land donation and lifelong friendship with Roger Frederickson that enabled the construction of the Glory House. And you know what? He never sought recognition or glory. There was no parade or party in his honor, and he refused to have his names on the buildings. That's the kind of man he was: quiet, selfless, and eternally modest. He believed in the goodness of people and in their capacity to strengthen one another. If this land can honor his philanthropic legacy and help aid in the rehabilitation of the citizens of Sioux Falls, then it would be a moral travesty to stop it. Thank you.
Ms. Meyer, thank you. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council? Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. Item number 5.
First reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by amending Chapter 95, Parks and Recreation, requiring 48 hours prior to official action.
Thank
Councilor
you, Mr.
Erickson?
Mayor. Yep, thank you. I move to approve.
Second, Selberg.
Councilor Erickson's made a motion to approve to set a date of hearing and second reading for Tuesday, February 21st. That was seconded by Councilor Selberg. Councilor Erickson?
No comments. We've had this conversation for the last 8 weeks, and so I'd ask for the council's support of this ordinance. Thank you.
A roll call vote, please.
Council members Kiley,
Yes.
Nitzert,
Yes.
Rolfing,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
That has passed 8-0. Item 6.
First reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, authorizing the amended and restated water tank lease agreement between the City of Sioux Falls and AT&T 57th Street Elevated Water Storage Tank.
Good evening. Darren Freeze, Public Works Water Division. Item number 6 is a tower lease agreement for telecommunications equipment on our 57th Street water tower. This tenant approached us in our program wanting to amend an existing lease and to work on the upgrade for their equipment. However, our program has set a precedence requiring tenants who want to amend an existing lease to step into our new lease agreement. This company has been a great tenant with an outstanding history of payment, security, and insurance, and we would appreciate your support of this item.
Thank you, Council. Would anybody want to set a date of hearing and second reading for Tuesday, February 21st for this item?
So moved.
Council Chair, thank you.
Second, Erickson.
Councilor Erickson, thank you. A roll call vote, please.
Council members Kiley,
Yes.
Nitzert,
Yes.
Rolfing,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
That has passed 8-0. Thank you, Council. Item 7.
A resolution approving the collective bargaining contract for police officers and sergeants, Sioux Falls Fraternal Order of Police Lodge Number 1 LC.
Bill, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Bill O'Toole, Human Resources Director. Items 7 and 8 are approval of 2 labor contracts at the City of Sioux Falls. I understand the council is taking both of those items separately. However, we've kind of got a consolidated presentation that really will cover both for sake of productivity and efficiency, and you'll understand why when we get through it. And at the end, we'll be happy to answer any questions as we move through. A little bit of background with respect to these labor agreements. Again, for maybe the members at home that may not understand all of this, the labor agreements cover wages, hours, and terms and conditions of employment for these employees. And the City of Sioux Falls reached a labor negotiations impasse with the Fraternal Order of Police and the American Federation of State and Municipal Employees. That impasse stemmed over disagreement regarding annual cost of living adjustment, what we refer to as the COLA for 2017 and 2018. The Fraternal Order of Police declared an official impasse and followed the South Dakota Department of Labor's administrative process to its conclusion, and the South Dakota Department of Labor recommended the city's COLA proposal of 1.5% to resolve the impasse back on January 27th. AFSCME was monitoring the situation that the FOP was going through at the Department of Labor, and they elected not to exercise the same rights and follow the administrative process as well. As a result, we're able to bring both of those labor contracts to you today. And in light of that impasse, the question that comes up next is, well, how do we move forward in light of that impasse that exists? And under South Dakota law, it provides that a public employer can unilaterally implement the disputed provisions if the parties have bargained in good faith and a legitimate impasse exists. And again, that's where we are today in terms of implementing the terms of those contracts and the city's last best offer to do so. And again, as I mentioned before, the impasse stemmed from discussions with respect to the COLA, and I want the council and members of the public to understand, what were those primary reasons that the City of Sioux Falls looked at when we were considering that COLA that later became the issue of impasse. And really, I would identify 4 primary reasons or bases. There are others, but these were the primary ones that we spoke of consistently with each of the respective bargaining units as we progressed through labor negotiations. And the first was that the first penny sales tax was not growing as expected. Second, state law did not authorize 2017 inflationary increase on property tax. And I know this body knows that the sales tax and the property tax are the two primary sources of revenue for the general fund, which pays the wages and benefits of city employees. And for public safety, the general fund pays all of their wages. Thirdly, we were obviously managing against the council's 25% reserve fund policy. And lastly, inflation at the time we were negotiating, as you'll see in a minute, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, was very low. Again, I'm not going to get it into any great detail, but as it relates to those, this is the sales tax collections, cumulative 12-month rolling growth rate. And obviously in the center of the chart, you can see the kind of the beginning of 2016. And really all I want to do is just kind of draw your attention. There was obviously a downward trend that was going on as it related to the as to the first penny sales tax. And I'm not going to get any deeper than that. But that was obviously a significant concern as we were negotiating and identifying the appropriate COLA. Again, the second largest revenue source in the general fund is property tax growth. And really what I do is draw your attention to the bottom line of this chart that identifies the CPI or the inflationary growth. And you'll see there are 2 years at 0%, one in 2011 and obviously the other, as I mentioned, in 2017. And I would like to point out as well that back in 2011, when inflation wasn't allowed on property tax, the city was going through some tough bargaining times then as well. And in fact, we went 2 consecutive years where our employees received a 0% COLA back in 2011. They occurred at different times, but right around that time period, every unit went 2 years with 0. So here we are again in 2017, and we're fortunate to not be confronted with as a difficult issue, but it is obviously relevant to the discussion. The other point that I'd make is, as I said before, the council has a 25% reserve fund that's required for the general fund, and we're obviously monitoring that on a regular basis, consulting with the finance department, and you can see what this graphically illustrates. So you've got to be mindful of where we sit in relation to the reserve fund as well. And as our budgets grow, obviously that 25% grows with it. Lastly, the way we measure inflation and the way we speak about it at the bargaining table is we use the Consumer Price Index for all urban areas, or the CPIU. And I'm showing just 2 different points in time just to be somewhat reflective of when we were bargaining with police and when we were bargaining with AFSCME. You can see there's not a big spread in terms of the difference as it was going on at 1%, 1.1% in August and 1% in May. The other thing I would note with respect to the police officer negotiations is that we also did do market comparative data with 13 benchmark cities, and our market data did show that we were competitive in the marketplace with respect to our salaries. So the discussion on COLA obviously was significant as it relates to measuring inflation. There's also some discussion that has gone on, and I wanted to show this slide with respect to the 2017 adopted budget. This is the general fund adopted budget. And if you look at this, it was a pretty flat budget from 2016 to 2017. But I do think this is illustrative of the fact that the city did place priority to its employees as the increase really came in the form of personnel costs, or an additional $3.71 million over 2016. So we do think we did prioritize the employees in that process. And while I understand that employees in this process were hoping to see more than 1.5% COLA, but and we also recognize that there's additional costs other than direct compensation. And these figures also are inclusive of a $1 million increase in healthcare costs for health premiums to the City of Sioux Falls employees. If you don't recall, the City of Sioux Falls pays 75% of the premium. The employees pay 25%. So there was a $1 million increase that the city had to include or account for. And of course, then there was also an additional $671,000 to fund pensions. And again, some other costs with respect to funding those wages and those level of increases. So we do think this mayor, this council, has in fact prioritized the city employees in this process. But unfortunately, despite our efforts at the bargaining table, we didn't come to an agreement. It does not happen with any regularity. We agree so much more than we've ever disagreed in the past. but the law does recognize when that genuine impasse does exist, there needs to be a mechanism to move forward and make progress. And that's what we're doing here today. And we're going to ask for your support of a council resolution to adopt those. And one last slide, I just want to touch on the subject because I know there's been some discussion with respect to consideration of retroactivity of the economic provisions tied to those labor contracts. And what I would tell you is that we're negotiating 3 different labor contracts, maybe not simultaneously, but in the same year. They all expire at the same time. We need to be very productive with our time. We need to be efficient with our time, and we need to follow timelines. Otherwise, we can't get things done. And when we start this process, we communicated very clearly with each of the respective unions when we started this process that we need to wrap up by a certain time in order to get things in place by the beginning of the year so we can get new provisions in place. We cannot have negotiations just simply go on and on. It's just not going to be a prudent use of our time. And I'd also comment that if the council does decide in this discussion that it wants to consider retroactivity, I would urge some caution that the legislative body is being inserted into the negotiations process, and I fear that there's some potential precedent value going forward in the future. That's going to conclude my presentation, and I'm going to have Chief Burns come up and say a few comments as well, and then we'd be happy to take questions.
Chief.
Councilors, Mayor, thank you. Police Chief Matt Burns. I know that something that's come up in this discussion throughout this contract negotiation is the concern about recruitment and retention. Well, I want you to know I share that concern too. It is something that's real. We see that not only in our department, but across the state and across the nation, particularly in law enforcement, public safety roles. We are seeing, frankly, less applicants for the spots. That's a real concern. But I also want to let you know some of the things that we're doing about it here. First of all, just yesterday, we started 6 brand new police officers. So that's a class that started yesterday, and they will go through their 15-week program here, as well as those that have to get their certification in peer. In addition, we're hoping to hire 12 officers for a July 31st start date. So with those 2 classes, now all of them would have to make probation, and we realize that that's not a certainty. There will be some of those that perhaps don't make the grade or resign because the job isn't what they expected. But through those 2 classes, we hope to be very close to our authorized strength of 256 sworn officers by that time. And if that should not happen, we are already projecting to have a 3rd class, as there's 3 classes a year at LET, for November. So I just want to give you a sense of where we were at in our authorized strength. Some of the things that we've done also to combat this is we worked closely with Human Resources to implement monthly testing, where we used to do testing on a determinate period, maybe quarterly for police officer positions. Well, we changed that, working together, so we're actually testing and interviewing on a monthly basis to have a more updated list, and that lowers the barriers for those wanting to get into the profession of law enforcement. We think that's very important, and actually that's working. In fact, we were testing and interviewing this week with HR. Also, we're putting together a department recruitment team. Now, this team will consist of officers and supervisors that are tasked with actively going out to job fairs, to universities perhaps, maybe even military bases and maybe underserved areas to actually recruit officers to do things outside what's commonly done within the HR scope right now. We feel that's a positive step. That's something we've been working on for a while. We know that's important to the FOP. In fact, we added a member and asked Sergeant Siebenborn from the FOPLC board to serve on that in the leadership of that group, and he agreed. So that way we're working together, administration and the union, on this issue. It's important to both of us, certainly. So just if you have any questions about that or anything else I can offer in that regard, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Chief, thank you. Bill, thank you. Tom, just 1 second, please, if you don't mind. Folks, we're now on item 7, and that involves the FOP. So if you would like to chat to the council about the FOP, we'd ask you to come forward now. Again, same things apply. Just introduce yourself to the people of our city. Keep your comments to 5 minutes or less if at all possible. And then what we'd ask is that we certainly appreciate the comments. We certainly do. But if you can make them as unique as possible, that would be also appreciated by the council. But I'm sure you'll do well. The next one is on AFSCME. So we'd ask you to, if you want to speak on the AFSCME topic, if you could just wait until that item comes up. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilors. Tommy Schmitz. As previously stated, we, the officers, detectives, and sergeants of the police department, feel this process has been a failure with no one benefiting in the end. Having a contract being imposed, while we would agree would be better than no contract at all, will do little to nothing to address the real issues facing our Department of Recruitment and Retention. Throughout this arduous process, the response from our citizens and general public towards this has been nothing but overwhelming support and appreciation, which is quite humbling, I can assure you. We hope that this overwhelming support by the public is also heard and supported by the council. These men and women behind me in the gallery represent the high standards that we expect and the citizens deserve to make this a great city, which will not change regardless of your collective decision tonight. Our resolve has only grown stronger through this process. With great expansion and growth comes not only prosperity, but challenges to address. Unwillingness to acknowledge and address those challenges is laying the foundation for failure. In life, there's always a balance. There is no good without evil. There is no positive without negative. Maintaining this balance to ensure success requires not only labor working towards a resolution, but management as well. This must be a priority moving forward. As great leaders have stated before, united we stand, divided we fall. We are committed to continue to make Sioux Falls the safe community it is, and to allow us to share in the quality of life that we have all come to expect. Although our work expectations are vast and enormous, we are willing to accept those responsibilities. But please don't forget, we are also people just like you. We are husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, and sons and daughters in this community. Like everyone else, we ultimately would simply like to feel valued by our employer, which unfortunately is not how we feel at this point in the process. We hope moving forward that collectively our labor union, vested management representatives, and the City Council can work together towards keeping Sioux Falls a great place to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you for your service to our city and for your time.
Thanks, Tommy. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council on this topic? Welcome.
Sierra Broussard, Sioux Falls. You know, I used to do this and speak on behalf of the police departments and fire departments on budgets and from other cities and other states. And when we get this far on a budget and people's pay raise, are you kidding me? The cops have PTSD, the divorce rate's high, the suicide rate is high. They risk their lives every day for a big city that is growing. The fire department and your police department should be number one in budgeting. Y'all can take the money and do something with the money to give these people their 3% here. This is very disturbing. As a community activist and an advocate, and I train police departments in other states, this is ridiculous that they have to be here tonight with their family and fighting a 3% raise. Give it to them. Where's the money at to give it to them? Was it all spent foolishly? These people are risking their lives every day. Yes, of course, we do risk our lives. They see suicides. They see this. We have policemen right now that can't even handle the job because they go to a suicide and they can't handle it. Then they're saying, I'm out of it. I can't do this job no more. Come on, council. We have to give up this 3% here. Very disturbing that they have to sit here and beg for this. When we call 911 because there's shots on the west side or the southeast side or the central side, who do they call? 911. And the police are going out there. When you battle in a fire and their suits cannot take it no more because the fire is burning them through their vests and they're coming and they need the equipment to go through a fire, they should not have to be here to get that. I'm telling you, and I don't care because I'm not a so-called activist, I'm an advocate and an advocate. I've never seen in city government like this in all my years, that we have policemen in the back with their families fighting for 3%. This is horrible. And I know that you're probably going to give them 1.5%. I'm sure about that. But I'm sure that we can find the ways and the money within the city government to give them their 3%. I just want y'all to remember this. Crime is happening everywhere. It might not be happening in the rich Southeast District. But as soon as y'all hear gunshots or y'all hear something, they'll call the police. And remember that. Remember that we need the police. We need them to be out there every day of the week. And we have to respect them, and we have to give them their equipment that they need, and we have to give them the pay raise that they need to do this job. It is a sad situation, and I don't know if y'all went through the police department on their recruiting, but there's a lot of them that went through it and couldn't even deal with the crime that's happening in Sioux Falls. And I'm not going to get into that detail, but I'm just letting you know that this is a sad situation here tonight, Mayor, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council on this topic? Thank you very much. Councilors?
I guess what disappoints me on this...
Scott, could you introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah, Scott Harrisman, Sioux Falls.
Thank you.
What disappoints me on this matter, I'm not going to talk about the raise or whether it's deserved or not, is that as a prime example of what happens in this city when the mayor and his directors come up with the budget each year and the council is handed this gigantic budget and they have no say in the whole matter. It was said that the council agreed to this 1.5% increase. Well, the council didn't put the budget together. They were handed the budget. There needs to be a change, and I know it's not going to happen with this mayor, but I hope with the next mayor that the council sits down with the administration and they come up with the budget together so they can discuss things like this, so we don't have a whole crop of union people sitting here wanting a raise. Now you got a council that's got to sit here and vote on this, and they had nothing to do with it. They're sitting there, they got to vote on something they had nothing to do with. It's pathetic. We have a government that has branches and checks and balances. We don't have this going on in Sioux Falls. And this is why this happened. And this is why we're here tonight. And all these people are sitting here wanting a raise because the council wasn't involved from the beginning. They weren't involved with the negotiations, and now they're asked to vote on it. It's stupid.
I am David Zokaitis, and I think I'd like to advocate a little bit of reason and sanity here. We'd all like to get 5% raise every year. I've been plenty of years in the workforce. I haven't gotten diddly do for a raise. And, you know, there's only so much money to go around, and I appreciate the problem that the city is in, and I appreciate the problem that the police force are in. But there's only so much money. We can't grow it on trees.
Folks, anybody else? Thank you. Council? Councilor Erickson?
I have a question.
Thank you, Councilor.
Director Bill O'Toole, if you could, please.
Bill?
My questions are in regards to the timeline. I know that an impasse was declared, but walk me through, when was the last time we negotiated with FOP? How much lag time was there? My kind of question behind this is, I guess I'll wait until I hear that, and I'll ask the next one, sorry.
And I don't have all the dates. What I can tell you is that we didn't receive the decision from the Department of Labor until January 27th. And once we did have that information, we got on the council agenda as quickly as we could, because that did represent the end of the process.
Can you back up from there as far as the delay of why did it take so long to get to January 27th? I mean, I know that it went to the Department of Labor, but back up before that.
Sure. I mean, and without getting too much into the exact timelines, obviously we had several bargaining sessions. The FOP took the information back to their members for a vote. That takes time.
Right.
Obviously, the vote was rejected. We went back to the table, had some discussions, did not resolve those issues. And then there are timelines that are laid out in statute as to when the FOP can engage and file for that impasse with the Department of Labor. And really, there's kind of a twofold process. There was first a conciliation phase that's set by the state of South Dakota. We went through that. And then there's the fact-finding hearing that then also took additional time. So we were somewhat subject to the state's schedule in that process as well. So I hope that answers your question.
It doesn't. Part of my concern with it is the delay and how long it took that we couldn't get it done by January 1st. Did we need to start negotiating sooner so we could get it done and make sure that when we hit the first of the year, we got to that point? I don't know if there's any guidelines as far as wrapping our hands around that to making sure that we don't have this 4-month delay again.
Yeah, and I guess my response to that would be is the FOP was actually the ones we started with first. And I think we started back in May, if I remember correctly. So that typically would be more than an adequate time to get it done. Like I said, unfortunately, in this case, it didn't happen that way.
Thank you.
Councilor Bach.
Thank you, Bill. I have a question for Chief Burns. Chief, one of the things that the FOP talks about repeatedly, and I think it's important for us to start by saying this has to be one of the worst votes for us to be involved with. These truly are the people who protect and serve us, and I don't want anything that happens here tonight to take away that feeling of respect and support that we have for the police department, for your officers, for your sergeants, or for the ASME folks, for that matter, afterwards. But one of my biggest concerns, one of the things that has been heaviest on my heart, is that idea of how many of those folks who we do recruit, and you talked about you just hired 6 new ones, you'll do 12 more in July and perhaps some more in November. How many of those folks do you expect, you just know flat out are not going to make it? And can you talk about why?
Typically, that number is about 85%, but over the past 3 years, we've seen a higher number in that. We're actually looking internally and trying to go through some of our, not only our hiring records, but even the things that we look at inside that hiring process, the background, see if some of the things should have stood out perhaps to us a little bit brighter, and just trying to do an internal analysis. But some of the reasons that folks don't make it through training is the job is not what they expected. It was more involved. They know coming into the job that they're going to have to work weekends and holidays and things like this. But when the practical reality of the job sets in and they have a family and they see that the toll it takes on them and that's kind of schedule, it's just more than they bargained for. And some of them, others just aren't up to the rigorous nature of the training. There's things that they have to do in the course of the job that they're just not able to accomplish. Sometimes that puts them in a dangerous situation where their own officer safety is just compromised with that of their fellow officer, and that is a situation which is untenable. And so we go through the necessary process to say, hey, perhaps this isn't the job for you. This isn't in Sioux Falls. Perhaps it won't work right now. Not saying you won't be a good officer somewhere else. It's just in this situation at this time, in spot in your life, it's not going to work. So those numbers are a little bit higher, certainly, than what we'd like. But again, we're doing a review not only of our hiring process internally, but also our training program to see what's working, how we expect it to work, and if there's things we can do better.
So did I hear it right? As much as 85%?
No, typically 85% of them of each class will make it, but
Will
in the
make
past
it.
3 years it's been higher than that,
Been higher.
and some years upwards of 30%, depending on the class size.
Okay, so we're looking at around 30% that we know are going to fall off for whatever reason. That's kind of what the number is
It
right
has
now.
been higher over the past 3 years, yes.
So is that different now? You've been in law enforcement for a long time. Is it different now? Are those numbers changing? And do you have any idea why that is?
Those numbers are trending higher. I think there's a lot more. The job has always been difficult. There's not only pressures at home, but there's pressures on the job. There's things that officers see in the course of their duties that are very, very stressful. And we've come a long ways in that regard with our peer support. When there is a stressful call, we have specifically trained officers on our department that will come to the side of the officer that may have been exposed to something that's very troubling or traumatic and help them through that. we've been very intentional about beefing up that team and making sure we're reaching out to those that need it, and even if they may not realize it. So, you know, we're trying to identify those things, those stresses, those pressures, those things that can compromise an officer's ability to do the job.
Well, I appreciate that. I keep thinking that there probably is no amount of money that's going to, you know, fix the pain or the trauma that one experiences in some of the situations that I imagine that your folks are involved with. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilor Neitzer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For Director O'Toole, I'd just like to revisit the timeline. Can you remind us when the last FOP, the last formal negotiation session was? Was it August?
Oh my, yeah, right off the top, I don't recall. That sounds accurate.
And then, do we know when they filed with the Department of Labor to start the conciliation process?
I'm sorry, I don't recall that right off.
Could I have a union representative just answer that question, or city attorney?
Councilor Neisert, I can't remember the exact date, but just to keep in mind, I think our last bargaining session with the FOP was August 9th, and then the FOP gave a written declaration of an impasse sometime after that. They invoked the South Dakota Department of Labor administrative process, and what's interesting to note here is once that process starts, we are, as a city, not able to implement the last best offer, and I think that maybe has not been stated again tonight. But while that process is going on, the city is prohibited. It's an unfair labor practice for us to go forward as a city and implement the last best offer, and as Bill said, that process lasted from the time the union would have invoked it sometime after our August 9th session until we got the decision from the Department of Labor near the end of January of this year.
Do we have any idea about when they would have started that process? A month, for example? Can I have Officer Schmitz just, or I'm sorry, Mr. Schmitz.
Tommy, the question was about Councilor Neisert. Do you have any idea when you began the process to go to the state of South Dakota?
I believe October 28th was the official filing date with Department of Labor, and then as Bill alluded to, then we are subject to their schedule at that point to get through the conciliation and then the fact finding.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it. Councilor Neisert, any other questions, sir?
Oh, thank you.
Councilor Starr.
Mr. O'Toole, if I could, or Director O'Toole. I'm going back to the email that you sent to us earlier this week, advising us on the process, very similar to what your presentation was tonight, as well as Attorney Fifley's presentation last week at our informational meeting to bring us up to speed. One part of it really concerned me, and if you don't mind, I'm going to take part of this a little bit. I don't want to take it out of context, but this makes the point. You, the City Council, would be encouraging the unions to pursue their administrative appeal with the South Dakota Department of Labor, and despite any outcome, expect the Council to retroactively apply the contract at the conclusion of the administrative process. I read that to say we're putting pressure on from the administration for them to not go through their due process rights of appealing, whether it's conciliation as part of the process and then mediation or the ruling from the state. And that concerns me, that we're penalizing them monetarily from going through the same processes that are available to them. But tonight we're wanting to implement, or I think state law says we may impose the contract on them. So I guess my concern is how do we as a city, on the one side, say it's good to impose a contract, but when our employees want to go through the process, we're going to penalize them monetarily?
I guess, Council, I'd respond in a couple of different ways. Number one, we all were cognizant of the time frame. As I said before, that we have 3 labor contracts. We've got to follow timelines, and we've got to be productive, or it could go on and on and on. And we just can't, it's just not a good, prudent use of time. And we conveyed to all of the respective unions, this is the timeline we need to follow so we can wrap up. So everybody is kind of eyes wide open as you're going through this process. Certainly they are obviously very much entitled to follow the administrative process, exactly what we did, and we followed it to its conclusion.
But if they do, we're going to penalize them monetarily. That's basically what you said in the, if I'm getting the gist of what you wrote in the memo, is that yes, you can follow through with the opportunities that you have to take this process. They can't strike, they can't, you know, but this is what they have, the availability, and they're at the mercy of the state. And my understanding is they tried to push that process as quick as they could, but there's still, you know, hearings take time to schedule and making sure that it all fits into the state schedule. I'm just concerned that on one side we're trying to say that, you know, we've got to follow timelines, but we also have to give our employees the opportunity to follow through on what's available to them if they're not happy with the process of the contract negotiations.
Yeah, and I guess I don't link them in the same way, and it was certainly not my intent to draw that conclusion that we're penalizing. That is not how, that's not what I meant in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you.
Councilor Staley?
I just wanted to say that we were contacted by the police union last fall, I believe, and their attorney, and we were told we could not talk to them pending having an ethics violation come upon us during your negotiations. So we did not talk with them. And I'm so grateful that last week, 3 of us on the council were able to sit down with the police union and their attorney, and we could hear their side of the story. This is problematic for us on the council when we are being asked to sign off on a contract and we have no input on what's being formulated in this contract. And we're new on the council since May, but this has happened to us before, and I think moving forward, there needs to be some discussion about changing this, because it's not satisfactory to us, nor is it it's not right for the police union, the police officers, or for the public. I will say that the retroactive thing that you've kept up there all night, by the way, retroactivity, I think is a good deal for these people. It's in the budget. I think they were not doing anything illegal by asking to have their case heard by the state. And so I'm going to be supporting any action that we take tonight to go back and give them their back pay on this. I think that's the least that we can do to show that we really appreciate what these people are doing for our community.
And if I may respond a little bit, because I think there was 2 issues that I think need to be discussed. The first one was, if you've never been involved in the collective bargaining process, there are kind of rules of engagement that coincide with that process. In each respective side, whether it's the city or the union, designates their spokespersons or their teams that speak on behalf of the organization. Those are the rules of engagement that we're required to follow. So with reference to saying we didn't want you to speak to them, when we're actively negotiating, that's kind of what the law requires, and that's what our ground rules require.
But we didn't get any we weren't given any information as the process was going on. I think we didn't hear anything about what was being discussed, and I think we have a right to know that.
And if I can get to that point as well, Council, and I want to be clear too, and I think it's clear to most that the requirement to engage in collective bargaining with the respective unions is an administrative function. It falls to the mayor and the mayor's administration to engage in collective bargaining. The legislative parties get involved when that process is concluded and ratification is required. So those roles are very clear. That is an administrative process. It always has been. And we could certainly, Council, if there's a request to meet, we could do that. The ground rules also require and allow, I shouldn't say require, it allows for the respective unions to request 2 informational sessions with the council. Sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't, but that is also an opportunity for them to engage and inform the council as to that process as well.
Councilors, before I go back to Councilor Erickson, did anybody who has not spoken want to speak? Councilor Erickson?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
There's been a motion to approve this item by Councilor Erickson, second by Councilor Staley. Councilor Erickson.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the resolution by replacing all references to March 13, 2017 with January 1st, 2017, and requiring that all contract terms be in conformance with this resolution as amended.
Second.
There's been a motion to amend this item by moving the date back to January 1, 2017, and there were some other items as well. You've got those.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Seconded by Councilor Nitzert. Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. I'd like to make a statement about the amendment, if I may, please. As you've heard the timeline, we started this back in May, had an offer August 9th. FOP declared the impasse on October 28th. During that time, they had additional meetings and timelines that they had to go back to their members. They did not wait until January 28th to make this impasse. This was done long before that January 1st time frame. So this is not to punish them for exercising their rights. This is simply to make that pay retroactive. The unions have no assurance that this council or any other council will do this very same thing. This council is a part of the process, and if this is the one thing that we can extend, as they did follow their legislative process, their process with going to Department of Labor, we want to honor that. As I've read through the argument, there was nothing stated in regards to retroactivity that I could see unless I missed that somewhere. But there was a part that I do want to share, that we do recognize the budget implications of the city. We do recognize that sales tax is growing less than we anticipated. We would love to give that 3%, but this would just make that COLA go back to January 1st. And what this says is, this is not to say that the police department does not face significant challenges now or in the incoming years with recruitment and retention. The department's annual report shows Sioux Falls population grew by roughly 40% from 1996 to 2015, for calls of service increased about the same amount. The department takes calls well in excess of those accepted nationally. Property crimes, narcotic crimes, and crimes against persons grew at the last 25% from each 2015 to 2015. The number of officers actually taking the calls, however, stayed roughly the same. The number of officers available per shift also stayed the same. So we're asking these people that keep us safe to do the basic, to keep us safe, to do the same thing with the growing crime that's taking place. So I'd ask that you support this. When I first came on council, I did do a ride-along with an officer, and things that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, he just went along because it was his job and it was his thing to do. And so knowing that those people are out there risking it for my family and keeping us safe, I feel that this process was fair, and unfortunately, we're not able financially to give that 3%. But retroactively making this 1.5%, I think, is the right thing to do based on the timelines that were provided and the impasse dates that were declared, and ask you support this, please. Thank you.
Councilor Colley.
I have a question for Bill. I think in one of our earlier presentations, it was mentioned as part of the process, negotiating process, both sides or both teams agreed upon a schedule. Can you tell me a little bit more about that process?
Just in that we knew the timeline that if we wanted to have the provisions in place by January 2nd, that's the first pay period in 2017. We knew we had to wrap up with everything in advance of that, because we were familiar with the process that it took here for ratification from the council and implementation, and we tried to work backwards. We worked multiple timelines, had multiple discussions with each respective unit, so that we knew where we had to be by the time frame in order to make it.
And you had mentioned that both sides had gone in eyes wide open. So was it discussed that if it did go to impasse and it eventually went to the Department of Labor, that could impact when it would actually be enacted then?
Yes, and we were consistent throughout that it wasn't our intent as a city's bargaining team to recommend retroactivity under those circumstances. We were very clear.
And it was actually filed with the Department of Labor on October 28th. Is that the correct date again?
I don't recall the exact dates of the filings. I'm sorry, Counselor.
FOP said.
Okay. I'm willing to listen to further discussion.
Councilor Neisert.
Thank you. I would largely ditto what Councilor Erickson said, really 100%, so I'll try not to be real repetitive and keep this short. I do understand the concerns the city has with setting a precedent. It is a valid point. That being said, I'm going to support this amendment, and the main reason I'm going to support this is I'm not going to punish the FOP for exercising their legal rights. They hold very few cards in this process. Really about all they have is the Department of Labor. And when you look at when they filed and talking to their attorney and looking at the timeline, there were delays and they have to wait, and they are required to go through conciliation first, and they have to wait for that to take place. And then they can get to that fact-finding hearing. They can't jump right to the fact-finding hearing. All of that takes time. And so I just don't think it's right to punish them for exercising their legal rights in an effort to find a resolution. This is the one thing that we can do for them that's budget neutral, and it's the one thing we can do to say thank you for your service in a responsible way. So I would ask you to support the amendment.
Mr. Mayor.
Council, yes. Councilor Starr.
Just quickly to the amendment, I don't think anyone in the process has stood up here and said that either side tried to delay the process. The FOP, as well as AFSCME that we're bringing up next, stalled through the process. I think we've been able to objectively look at the amount of time that it took to get this negotiated, to go through the process with the state, to push the conciliatory process as well as the fact-finding, to do it as quickly as possible. And in fact, it probably happened faster than what the normal process is for the state to use. And no one stalled. It just takes time sometimes. And for me, this is, again, like Councilor Neisert said, just a way to be fair with our employees in a process that isn't always fair. It's part of negotiating, but at the same time, it says to our employees that we value you, and you didn't stall the process. You negotiated in good faith, as well as the city negotiated in good faith. I'm going to be willing to support this.
Councilor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
This is a tough one. I mean, I ditto what Councilors Erickson, Starr, Neitzer, Staley have said. I mean, it's easy to vote on a motion on this. I would love to see everybody here get the maximum possible raise. The part that I'm having a little bit of trouble with is the precedent it sets. I mean, the rules of the game were kind of laid out as this went along. Steps were taken in negotiations. Pros and cons were kind of spelled out as they went along. One of the cons that was spelled out with the unions was they were advised in the process that retroactivity would not apply. I have a feeling the way it sounds, people knew that this could drag for a while. So the precedent it sets to me is a little troubling. Of course, I would like, as Councilor Erpenbach said, respect and admiration for our employees, our police officers. Who doesn't have that in abundance? But to set a precedent that now we're going to kind of take the timelines, the incentives, the disincentives, everything that's been negotiated, and kind of come in here and say, well, we're going to take that out, the repercussions. I think that maybe sets a precedent that it encourages future appeals, thinking, well, maybe the downside isn't quite so bad. We're going to have some people behind that might not go along with what we thought the cons were. I don't know if I'm saying that quite so clearly. I'm just trying to, as clearly as I can state, behind the city employees, behind the officers, would love to see them get everything they can. The precedent that we are setting here to step in and change some rules here at the end is one reason why I'm probably going to have trouble voting for that amendment. So, thank you.
Councilor Chair Ruffing.
I'm having some real problems with this also. As was mentioned, the mayor's office, the administration, is the one charged via our charter with doing negotiations, not us, not the legislative branch. I hope if this is done, that the next time that if we want to take something away from him, he fights a little bit more, the administration, and that they don't try to do the same thing with some of the responsibilities that we have. This is their responsibility, not ours, the negotiation. I can guarantee you that the next time this round comes, or that the negotiations come around, this is going to be stretched out a long way, because as Councilor Selberg said the precedent has been set. It won't be taken back. It will not be taken back. And the other thing is, when we look at the three unions, why did the firefighters come to an agreement right away and have their situation done and have their 1.5% go in the first of the year, and not the police? Because that was something they thought they deserved more than what the police did, or what the firefighters did. Doesn't seem right to me, folks. Doesn't seem right that by extending, whether it was on purpose or just happened, that we're going to set a precedence of retroactive pay. My book makes absolutely no sense.
Councilors, we're now, we've got an amendment, and the amendment is to approve the resolution, but move it retroactively to January 1, 2017. A roll call vote, please. On the amendment.
Councilmember Kiley.
No.
Nitzert.
Yes.
Rolfing.
No.
Selberg.
No.
Starr.
Yes.
Staley.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
No.
Mayor votes no. That has failed 4-5. Councilors? Councilor Kelly?
I would just like to say as well, and it kind of echoes a lot of what my fellow councilors had stated previously. This is a tough situation to be in. We do honor our employees, all of them, fire, police, and as well as everybody throughout the system. It's unfortunately the environment in which we're trying to operate in right now. When we see other businesses within the city requiring their employees to take time off without pay or vacation time, even though they do not want to. I guess, you know, the alternative is laying off in those situations in order to save money. It's just, the other aspect here is the comparison of the wages. I am happy to see that we're within market, and that in one case we're exceeding, quite frankly. I'd love, because I think we're getting great service in this community, I would love to see that above market in all the categories, because I think they're deserving, and the city is deserving. So I do look forward to further market analysis to make sure that we do remain competitive, not just competitive, but I'd like to see us at the top of that scale.
Councilors, a roll call vote, please.
Council members Kiley.
Yes.
Nitzert.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Starr.
No.
Staley.
No.
Erickson.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
That is passed 6-2. Item 8.
A resolution approving the collective bargaining contract for Local 519 of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees.
Mayor and Council, Bill O'Toole, Director of Human Resources. I will not repeat the prior presentation. It is basically the same issue as before with respect to the FOP contract, not only with our AFSCME bargaining unit, and we urge your approval and support for the resolution. Thank you.
Folks, is there anybody in the audience who wanted to speak to this item? This is in regards to the AFSCME contract. Welcome.
Scott Harrisman, Sioux Falls. I guess I'm a little concerned. One of the counselors up here said that this is the mayor's job to negotiate these contracts. So why is the council voting on it? Should just have the mayor sign off on it and shuffle it away.
Read the charter.
So the mayor gets to do all the negotiations, and then the and then the council has to vote on it. Wow.
Folks, did anybody else want to engage the council? Welcome.
Tim Stanga. One thing that bothers me is we don't, the swimming pool, the indoor swimming pool, we're probably going to subsidize that $1.2 to $1.3 million. The pavilion, we subsidize that anywhere from $1 million to $1.2 million. Don't you think that maybe sometimes that these should stand on their own and maybe we should be able to pay people what they're worth? This really bothers me on not being able to pay the people that are standing up for us and taking care of our city. We tend to spend money knowing that the revenue in this city is down, but boy, we didn't hold back on that administrative building.
Folks, anybody else want to engage the council on this topic? Councilors?
Move to approve, Nitzert.
Second, Rolfing.
Councilor Nitzert's made a motion to approve this resolution, seconded by Council Chair Rolfing. Councilor Erpenbach.
I just wanted to comment, Mr. Mayor, that I work for one of those companies that's getting an average of 1% increase this year. And I have friends who work for those companies that are being laid off for periods of time without pay and without their permission. And so I'm sorry, it happens. The economy is what it is, and it's where we are right now. And so we all feel it.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Starr.
Sure. I move to amend the resolution by replacing all references to March 13th, 2017 with January 1st, 2017, and requiring that all contract terms be in conformance with this resolution as amended.
Second, Staley.
And Councilor, I
think Denise has a copy.
Yes, sir.
And same thing as before. Thank you so much, Councilor Starr. Appreciate that. Councilors, there's been a motion to amend this item to make this resolution retroactive to January 1, 2017. Thank you, Councilor Starr. And it was seconded by Councilor Staley, I think. Councilor Staley. Any discussion on the amendment, Councilor Starr?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I'm going to make the same argument here. The AFSCME group did make a decision to wait and see what the FOP did and their appeal process with the state. They didn't drag their feet, just like the FOP didn't drag their feet. They didn't extend the contract or the negotiating time period. And I would make the argument that, you know, the firefighters have a different contract. I think Councilor Rolfing made
About 1.5.
Exactly, but they also got other things in their contract.
Councilor Chair. Councilor Starr.
Absolutely. They did get other things, non-monetary things in their contract that they asked for, and that is also why they decided to complete the contract process, is my understanding as well. So there are non-monetary issues that are also available. There's more than just money things going on here tonight. There were other suggestions and opportunities that the FOP made. But the bottom line, I'll address the AFSCME contract and the amendment that I made. Our goal, or their goal, was to go along with the process and see what happened. Again, they didn't drag their feet. They didn't try to extend the contract longer. We're setting a one-time precedent that if you go along and it takes longer than it did, both on the state's calendar and ours as well, that you should still be able to get the money. We've talked about the budget going all the way back. We've budgeted for this amount starting January 1st, and our employees should receive that money starting on January 1st. Thank you.
Councilor, thank you. We are voting on the amendment. A roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Nitzert. Pardon me, Kiley.
No.
Nitzert.
Yes.
Rolfing.
No.
Selberg.
No.
Starr.
Yes.
Staley.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
No.
Mayor votes no. That has failed 4-5. Folks, we'll now vote on council. Very good, thank you, Councilor. We'll now vote on the resolution. A roll call vote, please.
Council members Kiley.
Yes.
Nitzert.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Starr.
No.
Staley.
No.
Erickson.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
That is passed 6-2. Councilors, any additional business? A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's not a motion to adjourn by Councilor Rolfing, seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Make it a great night.